Good morning. We're starting this morning with our early word Bible study. We're in the book of Job, looking at chapters, starting in chapter 38. Sorry, it's a little early. Anyway, starting in chapter 38. And I'll be explaining this to the class, but we're in a section of the Bible. If you were God, you were talking to one of the people that you deemed a good person. There's no one righteous, no, not one, but Job was a good man, and Job was considered righteous by God. And looking forward to the sacrifice of Christ. But if you were God and wanted to explain yourself to someone, who are you? What have you done? Why are you worthy of our worship? Why are you worthy of praise? Why should we listen to you, basically? Well, here in the book of Job, we have 3 full chapters of that, and it's really, really fascinating. Well, chapters 38, 39, 40, and 41. So 4 chapters altogether. Chapter 42 is kind of an ending for the book of Job. But in chapter 38, we begin looking, God begins telling us how he looks at himself and why he is who he is. And we serve an infinite God, an eternal God, who has loved us and written, and if you're saved, your name was written in the Lamb's Book of Life, was slain from the foundation of the world. But why should we worship him? What has God done? What is so great about him? Well, today we'll be looking at that, beginning to look at that. I hope you enjoy our class. Again, you can email me at sabowman1@gmail.com for any updates, or if you want paperwork or the notes that I'll be sending out to class after, we'll be happy to send them to you. So again, enjoy the class. Thanks again for joining us this morning. Let's begin our class, and I apologize for the late start. We're in Job chapter 38, and looking at my screen, Bill, you're up on deck first. So why don't you read verses 1 through 3?
Hang on. I'm on chapter 33.
Whoops. That was May or something. I don't know.
Do I go the other way, Scott?
What's that?
I'll read 1 through
All right.
3.
We'll start in here then. That's fine.
Well, Bill's getting.
You start. Read verses 1 through 3, Mike.
Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Desperation like a man, I will question you, and you make it known to me."
Yeah, and the translation here, and I'm using the New American Standard. Gird up your loins like a man, or put on your man pants and get ready, because I'm about to talk to you. And again, I will demand of you, and you declare to me. Okay, I'm going to talk to you, and then you tell me what's going on. Again, calling out Job to reason with him and to remind us that he doesn't report to us. We report to him. And when I was reading through all this, and I read some really good stuff yesterday. Sent you all a link to the John Gill study notes, which is you'll get the notes from John Gill, which is a verse by verse exposition written back in the 1700s, which is phenomenal stuff. And we're talking going back to getting Jewish sources and all this stuff. But anyway, I digress a bit. But how many times when we're, as we begin this, we go to God and we say, well, why did you do this? And what are you thinking? And why is this happening this way? Why is all this going? We have to remember, and we've talked about this before, about the sovereignty of God. God has all of this. And he's reminded me over and over again that I'm looking at this much. Okay, this is the total scope of my brain can handle maybe on a good day this much. And God's doing this much 24/7. And he explains as we get into this what things are going on at all times that he's doing, just doing it. I mean, it gives us an idea of how infinite and how God is and who he is and what he is. So we'll begin there and just kind of as we go through this, like the next section, Keith, that you're going to read. As we go through this, you're going to see, we're all going to see what God is doing 24/7. So if you'd read verses 4-7 in chapter 38.
Where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off the dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched a measuring line across it? On what were its footing set? Or who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together and all the angels shouted for joy.
What a glimpse into heaven and a glimpse into God. The exact dimensions of the earth. Even back then, if you read John Gill's exposition, they had a pretty good idea how big the earth is. And even today, we kind of think we know, but we don't. Is she still having trouble getting on? Or is that something else?
Oh, I hate that.
What's that?
I hate that.
Oh, yeah. I'm sorry. So again, foundation of the earth. Now we know that our solar system is part of a galaxy, which is one of hundreds of thousands of galaxies out there. My mind can't get around that. But he here talks about the foundation of the earth. Now, remember, he's talking to someone back 3,000 years before Christ. We're talking back after the flood, maybe around the time of Abraham, maybe before. So we're a long time ago. And to explain to someone here about the undergirding of the earth. Now, we know there's no pole out there holding up the earth. And if we remember if we remember our stories from back in school, they used to say that the earth was held on the back of an elephant. He was walking along. That's how the earth was being moved around the sun. Or that the sun maybe was moving around the earth at one point. But again, God's trying to tell someone and us what's going on. Now, the fascinating part is who stretched the line upon it? Upon the foundations. Okay, where were the foundations fastened? It's up there. It's being held up. And we're told that Jesus holds the universe together through his word. That the word, it can all disappear. So he is holding it up. And verse 7 is really interesting. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. Now, the Bible, and when you look at the translation of morning stars, you can go two different ways. You can talk about angels, the morning stars, and again, and he would be redundant, saying sons of God shouted for joy. Okay, and Lori's just having trouble getting on. I don't know what to tell her.
If you could use a laptop to get on.
Oh, yeah.
A phone, maybe Bill was saying maybe that's the issue.
Could be. Well, again, Keith got on with, of course, Keith's using Chrome, or I'm sorry, Android. Lori's using iPhone. So
Right.
it might be an issue with an iPhone. I could try to get on.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
So again, morning stars sang together. Here's the other way that this is looked at by, we're talking theologians, look at more than they say morning stars. Has anyone here read C.S. Lewis?
Yeah.
Chronicles of Narnia, okay? It's his most famous set. Well, in the Chronicles of Narnia, Lewis talks about the stars actually having sentiousness, being somehow able to hold a conversation with God, being up there. And so again, it's a totally different way to look at that. So the morning stars, we know that God has named every single star. Every single star has a name. And how many trillions of stars would there be in hundreds of thousands of galaxies? I mean, the numbers are just again, I'm looking at this much and he's looking at this much. He knows all that. So is it possible that that's possible? Yeah, sure it is. Yeah. God's a spirit. Maybe there's a spirit attached to a star. We don't know. But again, it's just a different way to look at the scripture. But it's still, And when the world was created, we know that the sons of God we refer to sons of God at that time would have been the angels. Okay, the angels were all created beings. So verses 8 through 11. Angel, would you read, please?
For who shut in the sea with doors when it burst forth from the womb? When I made clouds its garment, and thick darkness its swaddling band, and prescribed bounds for it, and set bars and doors, and said, thus far shall you come, and no farther, and here shall your proud waves be stayed.
Okay, and again, we all know the power of water. Okay, we're talking when you go back to creation, let there be light, created the waters, divided the water from the land. God set the boundaries for the water. And again, take this a step further. God's sovereignty says that God controlled the water when he created it, when he created the land around it, we set the boundaries, and God can move those boundaries at his good pleasure, which is why we have flooding. And we have natural disasters that happen. And we have to remember that natural disasters can be an outcropping of God's wrath and God's sovereignty for his people. And where everyone is a subject of God, not everyone is a child of God. So again, looking at it again, as God's trying to explain himself to Job and to us, this is kind of what he's looking at. We're in verses 12 through 15.
Have you commanded the morning since your days begun, and caused the dew to know its place,
Maybe the dawn.
the dawn to know its place, that it may take hold of the ends of the earth, and the wicked be shaken out of it, and take on form like clay under a seal, and stand out like a garment. You said the 15?
15. Mhm.
From the wicked, their light is withheld, and their unpried arms is broken.
Mine says uplifted arm is broken. And again, in verse 13, the Amplified here says the wickedness of night. And of course, darkness is associated with evil, light is associated with good. So we have, again, darkness and light, and the wicked, their light is withheld, and their uplifted arm is broken. We all take things for granted that God is placed on autopilot. And what he does and the way he set things in motion, it looks easy. I mean, okay, light, dark, world spins around, goes around the sun. If we think about what we'd have to do to control all of that, it's just, we can't even get a handle on it. We can't even make sure a spaceship's going around the Earth the way it's supposed to, on stationary orbit. And yet God has done all of this. And God's nothing could be further from the truth than the fact that the complexity of just a simple light and dark rotation of the Earth. If you talk to any scientist, if the Earth were like 10,000 miles farther out, we'd have a lot of problems, or 10,000 miles closer, we'd have a lot of problems. It's placed exactly where it is for a reason. And the fact that it's there is, we know that there is a sovereign power that controlled and put it into place. And it's just one of the ways, as we go through this, that God lets us know that he actually exists. If you ever read the Bible, you should be able to figure out that God is who he is.
I was gonna say, Scott,
Mhm.
how God can make something out of nothing. And then I love looking up in the sky and I was looking at the plane, and I was like, how God gave man knowledge to have a big machine in the air, and just a ship on water, and it doesn't, sink or any of those things. So I was like, it just is in awe. I look in the sky and I'm like, how magnificent God is for all that he has created.
Well, we take an airplane to fly through the sky. Our Lord Christ can be here, and his new resurrected body can be here and then there, but God is everywhere and in all things. So he has control over it all. It's his work. So verses 16 through 21. Bill, can you read now?
From ESV. Have you entered into the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of depth been revealed to you, or have you seen the gates of deep darkness? Have you comprehended the expanse of the earth? Declare if you know all of this. Where is the way to the dwelling of light, and where is the place of darkness, that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the path to its home? You know, for you were born then, and the number of your days is great.
And again, God, sarcasm is in here. 20 verse 21. You must know, since you were born then, or because you were so extremely old, that's the Amplified, God's taunting Job, if you will, and saying, well, since you know all these wonderful things, you have to know you've been around since the world, before the world was created, you must know it all. And God is reminding us that he is infinite, he is eternal past, eternal future. He has no age. He exists in all times, in all spaces. It's not constrained by a body like we are, and a perfect moment of time, or imperfect moment of time, but we are here. But again, the sarcasm here that God shows it's a taunt, trying to get Job to expand and think and realize how wonderful he really is. So it's amazing. Did you text Lori?
I did.
Okay.
I didn't get it.
Okay.
I didn't get any.
Well, she may be not even at the office yet. I don't know. Anyway, I just sent out sorry to the. Anyway, okay. Now we're looking at verses 22 to 30 in chapter 38. Becky, can you read that?
Have you entered the storehouses of the snow, or seen the storehouses of the hail, which I reserve for times of trouble, for days of war and battle? What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth? Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorm, to water a land where no one lives, an uninhabited desert, to satisfy a desolate wasteland and make it sprout with grass? Does the rain have a father? Who fathers the drops of dew? From whose womb comes the ice? Who gives birth to the frost from the heavens, when the waters become hard as stone, when the surface of the deep is frozen?
And reminded that God uses the elements here to combat the wicked. We saw that earlier. I remember that again, God uses the elements, the storehouses of snow, the storehouses of ice, and so on, in his sovereign rule over the earth. And I remembered what came to mind when I was reading this is the French army attacking Moscow, and Father Frost was an old friend of the Soviet Union, of Russia, and then of course the German army, when they attacked the Soviet Union, they were making great strides. They were within 50 miles of Moscow, and then winter came. First the muddy season, they couldn't move, the water, and then the harsh cold that they were unprepared for. Again, I say Father Frost was a friend of Russia. So, but again, God in his sovereignty uses all these things and knows how to use them and stores them up, if you will. And again, we're talking to someone in the thousands of years before Christ. There was science at the time, but nothing like we have today. But to explain to someone how snow works, how ice works, again, the storehouses of the Lord. And who are we to know that God doesn't just have a storehouse somewhere of the ice and snow?
And knowing the source of all this, who are we to talk about things like climate control?
Climate change.
Climate change that we can affect any of this.
MacArthur
It's
is
amazing.
MacArthur. I laugh every time I hear what MacArthur has to say about climate change. He says, "You think we have a problem today, and what we're doing to the earth is bad? We can see what my boss does. meaning God, and when the time at the end comes, and God's great and powerful, terrible day of the Lord.
And I think I was correct in saying climate control, because that's the stuff that we're going, thinking that we can do things with electric cars and things to affect our climate. We're thinking that we can control any of this.
Right. That we're smart enough to be able to control any of it. That one time there was when Russian Day came, or when May Day, May 1st was, if you remember, was the birth of communism. That's the day they always celebrated, the parades in Red Square and all that. They would literally seed the clouds out from Moscow to make sure it didn't rain that day. But that caused all kinds of other problems. We're not smart enough to control the climate. We're not smart enough to know when the rain should come and should not come. God does these in his infinite wisdom. And without a thought, he just does it. And again, to get our minds around that is
Because we can't
Yeah.
question God. That's the problem.
right. Okay, we're going now to still in chapter 38, verse 31 to 33. I'll read. Can you bind the chains of the cluster of stars, Pleiades, or loose the cords of the constellation Orion? Can you lead forth the signs of the zodiac in their season? Or can you guide the stars of the bear with their young? Do you know the ordinances of the heavens? Can you establish their rule over the earth? And again, I bring up again that God knows the names of the individual stars. C.S. Lewis refers to the stars in the heavens as in going at what they're doing is the great dance. And that's a great way to look at it. But again, here God's naming constellations. He knows them by name. He named them. We think, oh, well, somebody must have, God named the constellation Orion and the cluster of stars called the Pleiades. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. But again, all this, the way things are moving, they're all moving in a preordained pattern established by God. Amazing. Okay, verses 34 to 38. Mike, it's your turn again.
Can you lift up your voice to the clouds that a flood of waters may cover you? Can you send forth lightnings that may go and save you? Here we are. Who has put wisdom in the inward parts, or given the understanding to the mind? Who can number the clouds by wisdom, or who can tilt the water skins of the heavens? And the dust runs into a mass, and the clouds stick fast together.
Again, the mundane, the things that just happen, the lightning storms, the rain, as the rain comes down, all these things God has under his control. And it's something we don't think about. Again, our minds are finite. Our control is finite. Mr. Reed, good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome. You're known as the unknown, so I'll read the unknown. So just so you know. We're in chapter 38, and Mike just read verses 34 to 38. We're moving on to verse 39 to 41. Keith, would you read?
Do you hunt to prey for the lioness and satisfy the hunger of the lions when they crouch in their dens, or lie in wait in the thicket? Who provides food for the raven when its young cry out to God and wander about for lack of food?
And again, the animal kingdom gives glory to God, and God takes care of the animal kingdom. And we're in a broken world and a perfect world. Before sin came in, everything worked as it should be. But now we're in a broken world. The earth, we're told, groans because of what's going on. It groans for the Lord to come back. Here we're talking about animals being taken care of. And little things that God thinks of and that knows, and just random things that are happening at all times that he has control over. Again, this hopefully is giving us a really, really good look at just how infinite our God is, and he's not done with. And just I'm looking at I made the comment here, the circle of life from the Lion King includes the Almighty, despite what Disney thinks. God's not included in that circle of life that Mufasa talks about with his son Simba. Well, guess what? God's in the circle of life. He stands and rains down on all of that and he has control over it. All right. Now we're moving into chapter 39. And begin reading, we get it. God's giving us a glimpse of the complexity of life. Chapter 39, verses 1 through 4. Angel, would you read, please?
Do you know when the mountain goats bring forth? Do you observe the calving of the hinds? Can you number the months that they fulfill? And do you know the time when they bring forth? When they crouch, bring forth their offspring, and are delivered of their young. Their young ones become strong. They grow up in the open. They go forth and do not return to them.
Again, that God knows all the times and the seasons that are going on. So we have just a glimpse of the complexity of God. The hinds are talking about here. Hinds are another word for deer. God has all this under his sovereign control and knows all these things and knows what they need and has built into them what they need to do when they deliver. And they talk about reading, and now when you read the King James, it talks about they bend down and get in a particular way so they can eat more easily deliver their young, because hinds or deer giving birth is not easy. But the way they do it is easier because God has taught them how to do it to bring forth their babies. So little things that we don't think about, that just passes out of our mind because it just happens, is under the sovereign control of God. And here again, God is challenging Job. Do you know all this? Do you know how this works? Do you know why I did this? Do you have any clue of what you're talking about? Challenging Job because Job has challenged him. But in a good way. And we find out when we get to the end of this, we find out that Job didn't sin when he did this, but he's still calling Job out on what he said to him. So,
Well, he's revealing himself to Job.
right.
That is-
And to us.
Essentially, that's what's
Yes.
going on.
Yes, absolutely. And that revealing, again, we have a better insight of who God is by what we're reading here. It's to read this is so phenomenal and so complex, and just gives us more desire to worship God and to know that he's sovereign, know he's got control over all this. I'm talking too much today. That's normal.
Yeah, he's gone from talking about star constellation and clouds to talking about individual animals.
Yeah.
For some reason that I don't
Well,
understand.
he started with the big picture,
Yeah.
but now he's narrowing it down to, and we're going to get into ostriches and everything else that we look through this. He talks about little things that God has done. I mean, we can talk about, when you talk about evolution, talk about the archer fish who shoots water out of the can spit water up 10 or 20 feet, hit a bug, knock it into the water, and it eats the bug. I mean, the intricacies of God's creation is just incredible. And again, our mind can't get a full hold on it. And that's what God is trying to show Job, that Job, you're a good guy, but you don't have the answers. You're not me. You don't have control over everything. And again, things say this at the beginning, I'll say again, things in our lives happen that there's no way we want some things to happen in our lives. Who wants to suffer? Who wants to be in pain? And yet God has a reason for all of it. And when we question him, and when we shake our fist at him, which we are wont to do, God's saying, I know better than you do. And by reading this, we can remember that God does indeed know better than we do.
I was gonna say in my commentary notes, it says, God asked Job several questions about the animal kingdom in order to demonstrate how limited Job's knowledge really was. God was not seeking answers from Job, but instead he was getting Job to realize and submit to God's power and sovereignty.
Right. Okay, now you can read verses 5 through 8 in chapter 39, Katrina.
Okay. Who set the wild donkeys free? Who loosened the bonds of the I don't know what that word, Oriental, whose home I have made the wilderness and the barren lands his dwelling. He scorned toil of the city,
The tumult of the city.
tumult of the city, yeah. He does not heed the sprout of the driver. The range of the mountains is his pastures, and he searches after every green thing.
Now, this is a wild donkey. Now, donkeys can be domesticated. Certain breeds of donkeys can be domesticated. Certain breeds of in the horse family can be domesticated. We're looking now at a wild donkey that will not listen to a taskmaster, cannot be driven by a man or taught by a man to do his bidding. This animal is not trainable. They say zebras, which are in the horse family, can't be trained. They're wild. There's no way to domesticate a zebra, supposedly. So again, God's giving us some insight into just another one of his creatures. Now we're going to talk about, we talked about donkeys. Now we're going to talk about oxes. Chapter 39, verses 9 through 12. Bill, can you read?
Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night at your manager? Can you bind him in a furrow with ropes, or will you harrow the valleys after you? Will you depend on him because his strength is great, and will you leave to him your labor? Do you have faith in him that he will return your grain and gather it to your threshing floor?
So again, we're looking at the ox, as we know, is a beast of burden in the Old Testament. God talks about being able to put a yoke on an oxen and use it as a metaphor for his children. Warns him not to stop an ox from eating as he's going, that it's cruel to the animal. But this type of this ox cannot be harnessed and cannot be made to dig a ditch. They didn't have tractors back then. They had plow blades and animals to pull plows. And this type of ox will not do what you want it to do. It's a wild ox. So move on. Verses 13 through 18. Becky, if you'd read.
The wings of the ostrich flap joyfully, though they cannot compare with the wings and feathers of the stork. She lays her eggs on the ground and lets them warm in the sand, unmindful that a foot may crush them, that some wild animal may trample them. She treats her young harshly, as if they were not hers. She cares not that her labor was in vain. For God did not endow her with wisdom or give her a share of good sense. Yet when she spreads her feathers to run, she laughs at horse and rider.
Again, all good gifts to animals and man come from the Lord. Interesting that it's amazing when we look at this. And again, if you read John Gill, which you'll get later, how he looks at this, evidently the ostrich, it's very interesting. An ostrich is not smart enough. Okay, an ostrich will lay its eggs, but an ostrich isn't smart enough to know which eggs belong to it. So it may go sit on somebody else's eggs, and somebody else will come and sit on their eggs. They don't know their offspring. They're not that way. And again, in the land that they're in, they have to protect the eggs somehow. They can't just let them lay. So again, they'll arbitrarily, male and female, will nest the eggs of other animals. And how dumb the unintelligence or the lack of wisdom. An ostrich will literally stick its head in the bush and think it can't be seen. You know, you've heard an ostrich bury your head in the sand like an ostrich. Well, an ostrich will do that thinking that if it does that, nobody can see it. That's how not very smart it is.
It can run 40 miles an hour. though.
It can outrun a horse. Yes. They flap their wings. They can't fly, but they can run like the wind, if you will. So, and again, just fascinating look at another animal that God made.
Well, he's actually showing that instinct is not the same across animals. He's
Right.
showing that each instinct given to animal is woven in a separate way.
And by the way, the other thing that they talk about is ostrich eggs were prized delicacies for food back in the day too. But good luck getting around an ostrich to get it because they're not very happy. But you can have it. And one ostrich egg equals 16 regular eggs, over a dozen eggs. So yeah, little things you learn.
In Africa, they use ostrich eggs to store water in.
Wow. Now see, I didn't know that. That's fascinating. They're big enough, and evidently they have a tough enough shell. So it makes sense. Okay, next one to read will be Mr. Reed. Can you read verses 19 to 25?
Hast thou given the horse strength? Hast thou clothed his neck with thunder? Canst thou make him afraid as a grasshopper? The glory of his nostrils is terrible. He paweth in the valley and rejoiceth in his strength. He goeth on to meet the armed men. He mocketh at fear and is not affrighted. Neither turneth he back from the sword. The quiver rattleth against him, the glittering spear and the shield. He swalloweth the ground with fierceness and rage. Neither believeth he that it is the sound of the trumpet. He saith among the trumpets, Ha ha! And he smelleth the battle afar off, the thunder of the captains and the shouting. And in case you didn't realize, that's from King James.
Yes, it is. I got that. Thank you. And again, it's fascinating. Again, the horse talks about, now this horse, this is a domesticatable animal. The horse has been domesticated from the beginning of time. We read about horses in the book of Revelation. And the horse and rider, of course, will be killed at that time. But we're given an idea. The horse is built so that it is fierce. It is very strong, but it's also fearless. I think that's what I'm trying to look for. It's not crazy afraid of a sword or an arrow, or it's a perfect Jeep, if you will, for war before Jeeps were invented. It was the way to get around at the time. And again, the horse is domesticatable. God allowed the horse to be used in service to us. And again, this is just part of the intricacies of God's plan, that he allowed the horse to be domesticated and used for us. And we use it like we use everything else. It can use to be good for transportation or for evil for war. So,
Scott,
yes.
what does your verse 20 say?
Was it you, Job, that made him? Well, I'm sorry. Verse 20. Was it you, Job, who made him to leap like the locust?
Yeah, he said grasshopper.
Well, that's locust, same thing. They were saying different versions will
Well,
have
he said he was reading from King James,
James,
and mine
yeah.
said locust.
locust. Yeah. The locust and grasshopper are pretty much the same, although the locust is nastier than a grasshopper, in my opinion. I think they swarm more than grasshoppers do, and they can do a lot more damage. Majesty of the snorting nostrils is terrible. Wait till we get into Leviathan. And we talk about the nostrils. Just fascinating stuff. Anyway, moving on. Next we have, let's see, we're back in the room. Verse 26 through 30 of chapter 39. Is it by your wisdom, Job, that the hawk soars and stretches her wings toward the south as winter approaches? does the eagle mount up at your command and make his nest on high in an inaccessible place. On the cliff he dwells and remains securely upon the point of the rock and the stronghold. From there he spies out the prey, and his eyes see it afar off. His young ones suck up blood where the slain are. There he is he. Again, didn't know this until I studied this. Eagles don't drink water. Anybody else know that? They drink blood. They drink blood. They don't drink water. They drink blood. Had no idea. And eagles are scavengers. That's why we read about where the slain bodies are, there the eagles will be. Eagles are scavengers. I mean, they'll kill to eat. There's nothing dead, but generally they'll eat what's on the ground. And of course, there's particular kinds of eagles called vulture eagles. That's the word that they used back in the 1700s for vultures that will come and only eat carrion, period, rotting flesh. So that's God's cleanup crew along with the flies and everything else. But again, we're just getting a glimpse of God in his creation and what he's done and how he's built this all. It's really fascinating. Okay, we're moving on now to chapter 40. Mike, if you'd read verses 1 through 5.
And the Lord said to Job, shall a fault finder contend with the Almighty? He who argues with God, let him answer it. Then Job answered the Lord and said, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I have spoken once, and I will not answer. Twice, but I will proceed no further.
So we hear a little bit here from Job. And again, when you read Gil, gives some more insight. Goes to the Targum, the Jewish version of this, if you will. Says that when God asked Job this question, the whirlwind stopped. And he stopped. Remember, God's talking out of a whirlwind. This is how this all started. He's talking to Job that way. The whirlwind stops and he's wanting Job to reply. This is the way he gave a sign to Job that he should reply. So Job replies to him. And my note here says his tone is much different now. That God allowed Job to speak at all through this discussion or one-sided discussion that God's having is amazing to me. That he's just he's waiting for Job to answer. So
But
okay,
he
Job,
realizes how insignificant he is. Yeah, you stop to think about it. You hear all this. You got to come to this conclusion of who are you to think that you can do anything.
right. Well, the Bible tells us, who is man that thou art mindful of him? And the one thing that I take comfort in when I screw up, he realizes that we are but dust. I mean, it's scriptural. He understands who we are, where we are. And yet we still, when we get mad, we still do this, and I've done it myself. We all do, but we are we should all be like Job. I've spoken once, but I will not reply again. Indeed, twice have I answered, but I will proceed no further. So I say, okay, Lord, what else do you have for me? And he gives that to us, verses, by the end of that, 6 through 14.
I'm up.
Yep, you're up.
Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Would you discredit my justice? Would you condemn me to justify yourself? Do you have an arm like God's, and can your voice thunder like his? Then adorn yourself with glory and splendor, and clothe yourself with honor and majesty. Unleash the fury of your wrath. Look at all who are proud and bring them low. Look at all who are proud and humble them. Crush the wicked where they stand. Bury them all in the dust together. Shroud their faces in the grave. Then I myself will admit to you that your own right hand can save you.
And again, God proclaiming who we are, putting us in our place, telling us how to look at ourselves, how we should be looking at ourselves. We can do none of this. Our attempts to put the wicked in their place is our judicial system, if you will. And we put them in prison and so on. But again, with a word, God could do any of this. And the way the Amplified reads, verse 13, bury and hide them all. This is the wicked. Bury and hide them all in the dust together and shut them up in the prison house of death. God has infinite control over mankind and over what happens. It's his world, it's his universe, if you will. Here we go. So now we're still in chapter 40. Now we start off with Behemoth, and then we're going to talk about Leviathan. This will get interesting. So, and would you read verses 15 through 24? Take your time. Funny words in here.
Oh, you got me when I.
Okay. All right.
Behold, Behemoth,
Behemoth.
Behemoth,
Behemoth. Mm-hmm.
which I have made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength is his loins,
Loins. It is loins.
and his power is the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar.
Cedar. Mm-hmm.
The
And tendons of his thighs.
well, mine says sinews.
Sinews. Yep. Same thing. Yep.
Tendons? Okay.
Yep.
His thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze. His limbs like bars of iron. He is the first of the works of God. Let him who made him bring near his sword. For the mountains yield the food for him, where all the wild beasts play. Under the
Lotus trees. Mm-hmm.
plants he lies. In the cover of the reeds in the marsh. For the shade of the lotus trees cover him. The willows of the brook surround him. Behold, if the river is turbulent, he is not frightened. He is confident through Jordan, rushes against his mouth. Can one take him with hooks or pierce his nose like a snare?
Okay, now this is the first of the animals that God talks about here that it gets a little, what is it? Okay. Now, what's that?
What is it?
Okay, now the Amplified says that in the Hebrew, the word behemoth is more like the hippopotamus. So here we're talking about a known animal, one that would be known. And again, why would this be important? Job would know about a hippopotamus. They were prevalent at the time in the land of Uz where he was at. So they were there. There were the hippopotamus about. And this gives us an idea, again, looking at God is showing us he's created an animal. And again, one more example of his sovereignty, of his wisdom, of what God is and what he does and who he is. He's created this very powerful animal. And yet, this is not something that we could harness for our use to do something for us, like an ox or a domesticated ox or a horse. But it's an animal that God created, a very powerful
Leaves
animal.
grass, and that's where
Yeah.
they kill him with a hippo.
Yeah.
So it's an axe-like thing.
Yeah, big. Yeah. And his nostrils, if you look at a hippopotamus, his nostrils are high up on his big mouth, if you will, so that if the water rushes at him, he'll still be able to breathe. He can swim through the water. They're more at home swimming through the water, and feels probably better for them to swim because they're big, they're heavy. And yet and people look at this, and the other type of animal that they think about for both Behemoth and Leviathan are elephants. The difference, though, is a hippopotamus has very strong bone structure. An elephant again, you learn these things as you're studying the Bible. An elephant has porous bones, which I never knew. They're not really, you think, oh, elephant would have to have really, really strong bones. Elephants' bones are porous. I didn't either. And you learn this stuff and go, huh? But again, you would think when God created the elephant, it would be, no, he'd have the strongest bones. No, hippopotamus, bones like bronze, really, really powerful. I mean, very strong as compared to a Leviathan, which we're going to get into Leviathan now. We're making a lot of headway today. And this is really a fascinating section. Chapter 41, which is the last, if you will, thing that we're looking at from God. Chapter 41, or it's 5:2. We probably should quit, right? We'll get Leviathan next, finish Job next week. Reason being, there's a lot here to talk about, and a lot of conjecture about who Leviathan is. I mean, Leviathan, if you want to read about it this week, some people think it's a crocodile. And yet, we talk about fire coming from its nostrils. There are no crocodiles with fire coming from their nostrils. And they actually found there was a super alligator that was 40 feet long that had an extra set of nostrils in the front that had a compartment behind it. Could have been a fire generator, some kind of a biometric generator of flames. So I mean, it's going to get really fascinating. So I guess we'll save that for next week. We'll finish up. We'll definitely finish the book of Job next week. We made it really far this week. I'm real happy. My plan is when we're done with Job, Mike on Sunday morning is doing Daniel. We're going to study Daniel too. I'm afraid we'll take longer than Mike to study it, but I talk a lot. But I think it'd be helpful. We've gone through all the minor prophets, all the major prophets in the Old Testament, except we've not done Daniel, and we didn't do Jonah either. We never did Jonah. But Daniel would be one that I want to do. We're in end times. We're going through some tough times as a nation. And I think it would speak to us to study Daniel and to get some insight from one of God's beloved, if you will. Man whom God loves. Any other comments this morning?
Great to see you guys. I'm gonna head off to school.
Okay.
Bye.
Nice meeting you.
You can always count on Al.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I'm hoping next week that everybody can get on. The only one we couldn't get on now. Al, you said you had to log into Google to do it. Is that right?
Well, what I did was my Google Meet was defaulting to my CCA email address. So what I had to do was add an account for Fury 56, and then it worked.
Wow, that's fascinating. Okay, well now,
So Lori was probably having the same problem.
Well, that's the funny thing. There's an invitation to her with her CCA address. So that's even more interesting to me. So
it's new technology.
Computer.
The computers, the crabgrass on the lawn of life, right? Technology.
no, printers are the crabgrass in the lawn of computers.
Yeah, I just got a printer and I have a problem with it, so I understand. All right, Mike, would you pray for us this morning, please, as we go out?
Father, let's pray for all concerned here as they go about their business today. Pray for safe travels and on a wonderful day. And we just look forward to coming together to worship you this Sunday.
Yes.
In Jesus' name.
Amen. Thank you, Mike. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Good seeing
One things.
Thank
Bye.
you, Marlon Perkins.
you. The Wild Kingdom.
Do you know Jesus as your Lord and Savior? If not, please click the link in the upper right-hand corner to view our message, the most important video you will ever watch. Join us for worship Sunday mornings at 10:30 a.m., either in person at 2595 Elmwood Avenue in Kenmore, New York, or on Facebook at facebook.com/KNOXEPC. Find past sermons on our website knoxepc.com/sermons.
Knox Sunday School happens every Sunday at 9 a.m. for kids grades kindergarten through 8th, and for adults of all ages. Email office at knoxepc.com for more information.
Knox Evangelical Presbyterian Church. Our motto is truthful teaching and graceful living. We are committed to growing in the knowledge of Jesus, serving Him by serving others, and loving the body of Christ. Need prayer? Please send your prayer request to pastor@knoxepc.com. To donate to Knox Church via PayPal, visit knoxepc.com and click on Giving at the top of the page, or scan the QR code above with your smartphone or tablet.